Attention humans, this is a think tank. Please insert this podcast directly into your nearest orifice for viewing pleasure.
Okay, you ready? Oh shit.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Welcome, come into our Thunk Tank.
Luke, don't switch to the other peanuts.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank. Come in the tank. We're thinking, and we're drinking,
And we're thunked.
and we're thunked.
Oh my god, I'm probably more beer than man if we go far enough back at this point.
I have never seen a more sublime demonstration of the totalitarian mind, a mind which might be linked unto a system of gears where teeth have been filed off at random. Such snaggle-toothed thought machine, driven by a standard or even a substandard libido, whirls with the jerky, noisy, gaudy pointlessness of a cuckoo clock in hell. The dismaying thing about classic totalitarian mind is that any given gear, thought mutilated, will have at its circumference unbroken sequences of teeth that are immaculately maintained, that are exquisitely machined. Hence the cuckoo clock in hell, keeping perfect time for 8 minutes and 23 seconds, jumping ahead 14 minutes, keeping perfect time for 6 seconds, jumping ahead 2 seconds, keeping perfect time for 2 hours and 1 second, then jumping ahead a year. The missing teeth, of course, are simple, obvious truths. Truths available and comprehensible even to 10-year-olds, in most cases. The willful filing off of a gear teeth, the willful doing without certain obvious pieces of information. That was how my father-in-law could contain in one mind an indifference towards slave women and love for a blue vase. That was how Rudolf Hess, commandant of Auschwitz, could alternate over the loudspeakers of Auschwitz great music and calls for corpse carriers. That was how Nazi Germany sensed no important difference between civilization and hydrophobia. That is the closest I can come to explaining the legions, the nations of lunatics I've seen in my time. And that's by Kurt Vonnegut from the novel Mother Night. And
Damn.
so, welcome.
So, Joe, guess why I'm mad about that?
Why?
I brought like 2 Kurt Vonnegut quotes,
And that's one of
that
them?
was one of the passages. Yeah,
It's a great quote,
it's one
though.
of the best ones. Actually, although I did include, I cut it like some of the middle stuff.
I cut some of the middle stuff,
And
too.
I include, at the very end of that, it goes, "But never have I willfully destroyed a tooth of my thinking machine. Never have I said to myself, this fact I can do without." And then the chapter ends with,
That's nice.
Howard W. Campbell Jr. praises himself. "There's life in the old boy yet, and where there's life, there's life."
Yeah, I think that says a lot of what's going on
That's from Mother Night.
with
Did
his
you mention
writing.
that?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Thunk Tank.
So a little bit different this episode.
We're getting deep.
We're doing a bit of a sort of different specific vibe, kind of focusing on one author in particular that I think we all have at least read some of, and I think we appreciate in different ways. And it's just worth sharing because I think a lot of what he says or what he said in his writing, going back now, his first book was published in the early 1950s, I think. But
Yep.
even that,
This one, I think, 59 or 62
this
or
this
something.
one, yeah, this was before some of his more famous books that put him on the charts. But I think a lot of these messages are increasingly more relevant. Like, he was very speculatively on point in that sense. So I think it's really interesting to talk about and see, as we talk about some of these other quotes that I've compiled and maybe you have, and just ideas from books you've read, how they really they've come to fruition. Much like he sort of predicted
on humanity.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll get into all that shit, but as usual,
Yeah.
let's start with the beer we're drinking.
Yeah.
Any vibes? To
Yeah,
take
Johnny,
care
how
of
you
in the
doing?
front?
We got Johnny here.
Hey, kids.
What's going on?
I'm drinking a pretty dope beer. I have a question, but let's introduce the beers first, and then I
Sure,
will
yeah.
ask my question.
Absolutely.
So I'm drinking a special release beer from High Branch Brewing in North Carolina. It's an imperial stout called Yucatan. Bam!
Ooh,
And
Yucatan Peninsula.
It was aged on peppers, vanilla beans, and cinnamon sticks. And
How the fuck do you, what do you put the cinnamon stick in? Do you grind it up? How does that work?
No, it's the sticks.
yeah, you probably just throw the sticks in the fermenter for a few days.
Oh, okay.
The
Checks out.
peppers is harder to get because like a pepper is one pepper is different than another pepper. So to try to make beer with
for
it
sure.
and get what you
Right.
want is very difficult.
It's
but this is really
inconsistent
light
at its core.
The pepper is really light and it's very balanced. Very good beer.
Wait, it's pepper like black pepper, not like spicy pepper, right?
no, it's
I've seen
aged on,
habanero.
it's aged on hot peppers, but
Yeah.
you really only
Oh, it
taste.
is.
You get the slightest tingle in the back of your throat. You don't get any heat from it because of the cinnamon and the vanilla bean.
Right, so that it balances out. That's like, remember that time we had that, it was something like that, like a
There was,
habanero.
habanero peppers in it, but it was I
was
forget
so
the
bad.
beer, but it was so overpowering that
Yeah.
I remember
wasn't
the
balanced.
waitress at the restaurant we were at even like came over. She was like,
She
"You
apologized.
shouldn't have gotten that beer." She's like, "I'm just gonna throw this away. I'll bring you a new one for free."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it was
I
pretty...
mean, she regularly gave us free stuff anyway.
It's really
Yeah.
hard to dose the spice just right.
It was
Yeah.
not. It was not balanced.
and they
That
were
was
probably
definitely
like,
the
"Yeah,
problem.
fuck it, let's put the beer out anyways."
Yeah, she was like probably like, I was gonna give him free beer
Do I have a
anyways.
Canadian accent now?
Oh
Did I
man,
just say
Oh,
beer oat?
Maybe.
what are you talking about? That came up last episode.
Yeah,
where
no,
we
I
were
had.
like,
Well, it was a southern thing last time.
well, you tried an Icelandic accent, and that also turned
That
into a
was funny.
southern accent.
yeah, I don't know.
So
All right, so Johnny, have you heard of Radiant Pig?
That's the brewery.
Yeah, Radiant Pig craft beers.
Where are they?
They're pretty small. They're like somewhere in New York. I went on their website and the website said like it's currently down. So, but I just found this beer. I've had another one of their beers before. The one we're drinking is called No Half Steppin'. It's a single hop IPA. It's coming in at like 7%. It's
nice.
very citrusy.
it's very
Have
almost.
you heard of Denali hops, Johnny?
Denali, yeah.
Denali.
They're a pretty new hop.
So does that
Interesting,
make
though.
sense that we're getting like very citrusy, bright kind of?
Yeah, it's almost
acidic?
like I was telling Luke. It's almost like lemony, almost.
Yeah,
Linalool.
which is cool. Like it's not my favorite type of juicy vibe in a beer.
I feel like it would be a better
I think
on the
citrus
beach
hops are better.
type beer.
Citrus, like because citrus hops can get some of that deeper,
Yeah.
like
But
sweet
this
notes.
isn't a winter beer to
This-
me. Like I rather it
Definitely
be
not a
hot.
winter
Like
beer,
if I
yeah.
was sitting on the porch and it was like really hot and I wanted an IPA, I would probably be down
yeah,
with this.
you get
yeah.
the lemonade vibe.
Yeah, exactly. for
We've
sure.
also got a few other beers here, folks. So we'll cue you in when we're opening them.
Yeah, I tried to get some Vonnegut themed beers, which I'll explain later, I guess.
What the
because
hell that might mean?
because it doesn't really mean much of anything, but there is some sort of connection.
Right.
He did have some sort of beer roots, according to my research.
I just assume
He did.
everybody cool that I read or see like also likes beer. I just assume that's a cool person's thing to do.
Yeah, or they like the vibe that beer brings out, maybe. So maybe they
Right.
Maybe they're like a Scotch
Or
person.
maybe they're
or
more
like,
naturally like that.
No, that's what I mean. Or maybe they just drink wine or cocaine or whatever else, and that brings out the.
Yeah, but the World War II
vibe.
crowd, they were big beer drinkers when they came back because they had
Checks
to,
out.
after Prohibition and all that shit. It was like, hey, we got beer back, and then during the war, they were like, you can't really make good beer anymore. Here, you can make Bud Light, and they were like, they came back and they're like, yeah, it's cheap though, and I don't have to talk about these dark feelings inside, so let's just have a beer. Yeah, they were a big beer crowd.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't have a good PTSD like
Right.
net to catch that, and you just drank beer and got over it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mental health services not as much
And World War II actually pops right back into the Vonnegut theme.
for sure. Yeah.
Before we get right into Vonnegut, I was just telling you guys off air about a news item I read this week about a new nuclear weapon that Russia has.
Oh yeah. Tell us
It's
about
called
that.
Canyon. It's designed to attack like coastal areas, cities, ports, whatever. It's a mega bomb. It would not only destroy the city, but also generate an artificial tsunami that would surge inland and spread the radioactive materials of the bomb. And the bomb is also said to be like quote unquote salted. They throw in cobalt-60, the radioactive
Yeah, throw it in.
isotope of
Yeah.
cobalt. Why not throw it in and make the city not inhabitable for 100 years?
Or 1,000 years.
Which is what it would be.
Yeah.
And it's about...
but the main thing is it doesn't destroy the city, right? It'll just make it uninhabitable for 100 years. So in 100 years, you could just move in and be like, hey, look, all the buildings are empty. Let's start...
What good does that do me, though?
Are you a crazy Russian oligarch trying to expand his power?
I guess that's why I'm not.
Yeah, there you go.
So I just figured, starting with that story of this nuke in the year 2018, it ties into the sort of worldliness and the types of worries Vonnegut had.
Yeah. I do have
You want to start us off with a bio kind of?
I do have
who is this
bio
Vonnegut guy? A lot of people probably don't know who the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah, so I just have maybe 3 or 4 minutes of just kind of some background information that definitely ties into a lot of the themes that are going to come up with some of the points that we're already noticing about him.
If a lot of people read him in high school, what book do you think it would be?
Slaughterhouse-Five.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you might have read him in high school and not even realized it.
Yeah.
But this is Kurt Vonnegut. Take it away, Joe.
Well, it's interesting you say that about reading him in high school, because the first day of every semester I have students interview each other to just kind of get them talking and get them working together.
Yeah.
And one of the questions is who's your favorite author? And I also do the questions, and usually I'll say whoever I'm reading at the time who I really like, but oftentimes I'll say Kurt Vonnegut because he's definitely up there with my favorite authors. And I would say probably out of a class of 20-something students, maybe one of them has read Kurt Vonnegut on average. Maybe one.
That's less than I thought.
It's less than I thought too. So I think he's less read than a lot of people might think, just based on what I've seen, and I think even more people probably, like you said, maybe read him in high school, but for a lot of people, do they really remember the books they read in high school? That sort of vibe.
That's a big part of it, and also he had some problems with his books being banned in some places.
For sure, yeah. Slaughterhouse-Five Slaughterhouse-Five maybe primarily. So just a few notes about Vonnegut in case you don't know much about him. The one thing I'll say starting off is, and again, I teach writing, but I'm certainly no scholar of Vonnegut.
Stop.
Or most anything else. No, I just mean I don't have a degree that says oh, you did research on Vonnegut for 5 years.
Let me just give Joe's disclaimer for him.
Yeah.
He loves reading Vonnegut. He is a writer and a writing teacher, but he probably just had beer this week and thought about why he likes Vonnegut. Right?
And
you're trying to say you didn't do a dissertation on Vonnegut.
Plus internet, yeah. So Luke basically nails it. But
that's a good disclaimer for our whole podcast, by the way.
For all of us.
Listen, folks, we're not academic researchers who are coming at you with the most badass cutting-edge knowledge. We're just 3 guys who drink beer and absorb knowledge.
Which is honest.
Yeah.
All right. So
I had a thought while raking the leaves. That's our in-depth research.
By raking the leaves and having a beer.
That's actually a great title for something, a book, a memoir. I had a thought while raking the leaves.
It's a little who's it? Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass.
No, that's
everything's copyrighted on this podcast, right?
That was my book of poetry I was writing.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You should probably not just spout the title out.
It's 1,000. The subtitle I could give out too. It's 1,001 poems. Inspired by restaurant condiments and packets.
Okay.
But there's
we'll look forward to seeing that.
There's a couple of colons in there and semicolons. I'll send you guys the artwork.
Oh, semicolons come up in this. There's a lot of things that we're planting seeds for.
Yeah,
oh, man.
Oh, you know that quote?
Yeah.
I don't think I have that, but I have another colon quote.
Cool.
But anyways.
All right, let's give the folks some
background information.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying, I in just my reading adventures, I kind of loosely equate Vonnegut as sort of the 20th century version of Mark Twain, where in the sense that he's very witty, he's very satirical in a lot of ways, he's very not afraid to say what the emotion is he's trying to say, to relate that emotion. So I think he kind of feels like a similar pattern of just writing style in that sense.
Similar niche.
Yeah, similar niche, definitely. But obviously, Kurt Vonnegut, whereas Mark Twain was 19th century, he was a 20th century writer, Mark Twain. So he was born in 1922. He actually died fairly recently, only in 2007. And as per, when he was born, he did serve in World War II.
Yep.
he actually went to Cornell. I read, but he dropped out when he World War II happened. He actually also studied.
It was a grades thing too, I think, right?
No, I don't actually. I don't know about that, but because I know that he did study mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon while he was in the Army, though, too.
Oh.
Did that war? I know in Vietnam, a way to avoid the draft was to enroll in college.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was part of it, and
Was
and
that
he
also-
knew he would be drafted, I think, when he dropped out of college.
Well, a lot of people would do that. They would join so that they had more of a choice
Yeah,
of what
yeah.
they wanted to do, which is maybe what I don't know if that's what he did, but he certainly didn't go through the normal rounds.
But he was exempt from it because he was in college before that.
Right.
Yeah.
So Vonnegut, while he was in the Army, he was captured. He was actually a POW after the Battle of the Bulge, and what's interesting is a lot of his work is I wouldn't even call it pseudo autobiographical, but there's certainly autobiographical elements. And the perfect example of that is
Sometimes explicitly, right?
sometimes explicitly, yeah, especially in his later works, like Timequake is a great example, where Timequake is basically, like, I would say 40% of it is fiction, and the other 60% is him just kind of narrating that, oh yeah, I'm Vonnegut, I'm like 70 years old, I can publish whatever I want. This is a book that didn't work, so I'm just going to fill in the gaps by rambling. It's pretty great, actually.
That's funny.
But,
He went a little Orson Welles-y at the end there, right? Where he's
Yeah,
like, or Brando. He just like I could just show up and people are impressed.
he's like, I'll publish and people will do it. People will read it. So the whole thing with getting captured during World War II was he survived the firebombing of Dresden because they had all the POWs in a meat locker called Slaughterhouse 5.
Right.
And that's actually a scene, or that's a big element from Slaughterhouse 5. There's the main character is in that slaughterhouse, and that's how he survived.
He's surviving in all these
Can I
carcasses
mention-
while the city
It's
burns.
pretty
above
dark.
Can I
yeah.
mention too that the actual historical bombing of Dresden was so bad? Not only did very few people in the city survive, like he might have known them all. It was such a big fireball that it sucked in so much oxygen as the city was burning that people living in the outskirts died of suffocation that the fire didn't touch.
Asphyxiation,
Like
yeah.
animals in the woods got asphyxiated because the draft was just so strong and the
pulling
heat
the
and everything.
oxygen upward. And
So
Yeah.
if you so really the only way to survive would be to be in a sealed meat locker, and you're risking using up the oxygen you have in there.
Right.
But it's
Right.
better than burning a lot. So I think hiding in a basement probably didn't help, or thinking you're in a bunker,
Right.
right,
wouldn't
own
help.
something
but,
that's sealed
like
as
literally,
well as a meat locker.
Yeah.
I
and
don't
in
know
And
if
how
it seals.
ironic a slaughterhouse.
yeah. And in the 40s, what sealed as well as a meat locker besides a meat locker?
Right.
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 So
And to your point, Johnny, the one quote that I took down for describing the scene is how he describes it in Slaughterhouse 5 when he gets out of, or when the main character gets out of the slaughterhouse, and it's a very simple description, but it says it all. He just says it was like the moon,
yeah.
which is just like,
Right.
oh, if I wanted to describe something as utterly uninhabitable as possible, it's
Yeah.
like moon's pretty good.
And foreign and alien.
Just
And
dust
what
and
is
ash
this?
and nothing
Yeah.
Earth-like.
Just
about
matter
it.
returned to its more basic form.
Yeah, just not even close to conducive to life. So,
Cool.
anyways, so he survived all of that, Kurt Vonnegut. So
By the way, he was only 22
he was
when
young.
that shit was going
Yeah,
down.
he was young. Yeah, and he survived it all, and he came back, and he started writing. So in his life, he published I think 14 full-length novels. He was a big writer of essays, and he wrote short stories too. So he wrote lots of things, but he's primarily known for his novels. His first one, Player Piano, wasn't a huge success.
So good.
That's one we'll probably get into. I think we have some quotes from that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And actually, some of his other books, which are some of his best books, like Mother Night and Cat's Cradle, I think those were both before Slaughterhouse 5, which kind of became his seminal work. Like, that's kind of his, the one that people read.
Well, that's also the one that got him attention, right?
That was the one that really got him on the map. Like, it went to the top of the New York Times bestseller list and all that type of stuff. So, and he just kept writing from there. A couple of things about his personal life, which I thought were interesting. He was married twice. He had 3 children, but he also adopted his sister's 3 sons after she died of cancer 2 days after her husband died in a train crash, which is very Vonnegut-esque.
The timing, the weirdness.
Yeah.
By the way, you know, a Vonnegut-esque thing, if I can go back to when he was 22 again, he came back from being a POW and got married, right? Mm-hmm. He also went to visit, it was before the war, actually, I think. Like 3 months before he went to Europe, he went to visit his mom on Mother's Day and found her dead because she had killed herself the night before.
How did I not read that? That's fascinating.
That's so Vonnegut-y too, you know.
It's so, and we should clarify when we say Vonnegut-y, and this is probably part of the other quotes and just some about what we'll talk about with his writing. He's all about trying to not even make sense of the chaos, I don't think, but kind of
smirk at it,
be okay with it,
yeah.
like come to terms with the chaos, right? And you see that in these exact anecdotes,
almost a comedic way. Like he found
it's
his mom
like darkly
dead on
comedic.
Mother's Day,
Yeah.
like of all days, like
yeah,
that's almost comedic, but that happened to him, you know.
Yeah, because it's ironic, and irony is a sort of comedy
in itself,
despite how dark it is, maybe. And
it's truthful.
It's true, and this is what his writing's all about. I mean, his writing isn't all about like necessarily things all that dark, like as dark as that, but there are elements of it throughout his writing of that.
Yeah,
that's a big theme for sure.
He always keeps that in view.
Yeah.
So you said his sister died, and then he adopted all her kids.
Yeah. So he wound up with like this, this big family, and he up until Slaughterhouse-Five, from everything I've read, he was really a struggling writer. But, he worked and he just kind of made it work. He made it happen. And once Slaughterhouse-Five took off and his other, works became popularized, he focused more on his writing from there. So, and that was basically the rest of his career up until, his death about 10 years ago now. And, the last thing I'll say just about the bio stuff is that, what a mind to like, if only he had been around like another 10 years, like the past 10 years.
I would want to hear his comments on like now.
Yeah, because he had some scathing commentary and essays that he wrote about the Iraq War. That was like
Bush, yeah,
because he was, he had stuff to say about the Vietnam War, and obviously Slaughterhouse-Five was published in 1969, which is right in the thick of it.
I think he got very popular because he was riding the wave of anti-war.
It kind of coincided. Yeah, for sure. And the last big push he had against a lot of these repeating ideas was the war in Iraq. I mean, if you read some of the stuff he writes about Iraq, like stuff that, people who kind of saw what was going on, like he called it right from the start, just like no hesitation.
Well, 'cause he didn't need like leaked CIA papers or whatever to figure out people's motives. He was just like, no, this is a war. Like somebody's benefiting from it. If you pay attention, you could kind of figure it out.
Yeah, maybe I'll just say along those lines, one of the quotes that he said. Oh, I actually didn't write it down, but I think I know it by heart about the Bush era was, "I never thought I'd live to find myself in a time where the three most powerful people in the world were Bush, Dick, and Colin."
Oh yeah,
that's a great one. I remember that. Yeah,
and it's just like, how did I not fucking think of that? That's so.
Well, that's it. That's just as ironic as finding your dead mom on Mother's Day. It's just like it's like what a crazy world.
But he was so good at pointing that out. You know what I mean?
It's about not taking that stuff personally and being able to just recognize when the universe fucks with you like that.
Yeah.
Like,
well, remember a couple episodes ago, I tried to tell that story of the guy who was coming home from the movies and weird shit happened to him and he thought like the universe was winking at him.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's almost like Vonnegut's vibe is like the universe winks at you through the suffering it throws at you, Right.
And whatever that means, like I don't think he ever gives an answer on like what the universe is.
He doesn't, but he asks honest questions about it and poses. He was definitely an atheist.
Well, he was I think that's another thing I should have mentioned was that he was actually president of, I believe it's called the Humanist Society.
Yeah.
And I think he even, did he describe himself as an atheist or an agnostic? Because I think he was an atheist who just didn't really care.
I think
that's because I think technically I'm an atheist, and all that means is you're atheetical. It doesn't mean I go out of my way to try to disprove or not believe in God.
I'm not saying that.
I just don't care. If you're agnostic but you don't care, you're really an atheist.
But
I think so. I think atheist just means I don't assume there is a God, but I will I will approach that aspect of my life with the same scrutiny I do any other aspect.
I have a question about that, though, because I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a fair critique against people who assume that because you're atheist, you are anti-religion or something like that, which I don't think
or
is...
that you believe in no God just as strongly as they might believe in God.
Well, no, but that's my question, because my understanding is, and again, I don't know if this is accurate, but my understanding is that's the difference between an atheist and an agnostic. An atheist,
I think now it is, yeah.
Is it?
I think that definition has changed because
there are people
sect of atheism that's so ironically like strong and bound together that it feels very religious.
Well, those are the militant atheists like Dawkins.
But that's my point. Why wouldn't you just categorize it as atheists or people who believe that yes, we don't believe that there's a God, whereas agnostics believe that I equally
so
don't
I
want to
guess what I was trying to say is in 2018 terms, Kurt Vonnegut would be agnostic, but at the time I think atheism didn't have this like militant aspect to it. So
I'm not even saying it's
considered an atheist in that like it was like the kind of people in the 70s and 80s where they could be like, yeah, I don't need there to be a God.
But I think
there's
there's still a difference between militant atheism and just because I can think if I think that all right, there is not a God, that's different than me thinking that there is not a God, and it is my journey in life to disprove that to other people. That's still a different vibe, right?
Yeah. That's
for
almost,
sure.
And hilariously, it's just like the religion side.
Exactly.
It's kind of like your, what's the word?
Proselytizing atheists?
Proselytizing.
I like that word.
I mean,
it's a good word.
Where you go missionary.
Johnny,
I'm sorry, it's pronounced prostating.
It's actually, I was just going to say that. Damn it. I was going to say it's called prostatizing.
Prostating?
Prostatizing. Prostating.
So I think Kurt Vonnegut speaks in a way that's very like open to anything. That's why he wrote about such fantastical like universe things.
Well,
his, like,
that's another point. Just to mention again, I forget what book I was reading of his, but he mentions it's actually I think it might have been Timequake. I forget though, but it's certainly autobiographical where he talks about I believe his first wife. I'm not sure exactly, but how she was very religious. I think she was Catholic or Presbyterian or something, but she was very religious, and it made her so happy that he basically says in his analysis that, he doesn't know or really care, but he likes that religion because it makes her so happy. It gives her such happiness, and that's important to him in that sense. So,
fair enough.
Yeah. But what were you saying, Johnny?
I wanted to go back to talk about the Iraq War protest because I just think it's
fair.
interesting that a lot of people, maybe younger people, didn't know who he was later in his life.
Sure.
So it's just you can imagine him. I've read some of the stuff he said about the Iraq War, and I could just see as like somebody that was very pro-war at the time being like, "Oh, this guy doesn't support America or his troops." And it's like he got firebombed at Dresden. He has some credibility. But I think I just think that's why his approach, like we've been defining, is why his stuff is still relevant. Is the same reason Twain is relevant. And some other writers going further back is they write about actual people, rather than specific events going on at the time. Like Slaughterhouse-Five isn't about the geopolitical struggle of war. It's about like the individual of the human fitting into these bigger moving parts, and like where are you really in it?
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because like on its surface, almost like a book like Slaughterhouse-Five, it does read sort of like, oh, it's about war and aliens or something. If you just read it at like a totally superficial level,
which is what I think I did when I read that and Sirens of Titan in high school.
Yeah, especially Sirens of Titan.
It's easy to miss some of the deeper shit in Sirens of Titan.
Well, it becomes about this idea of like individualism, right, or like individual identity.
So I read it in high school, and obviously I understood the plot in high school. I started rereading it just this week. I only got like maybe 30% into the book or so, and then it basically came back to me.
What was the main character's name?
Constant Malachi.
Malachi Constant.
Malachi Constant.
Yeah.
And it
great character.
I don't know. Should we spoil things? Should we just give a spoiler alert on plot points? Or are we going to get into anything like that?
That's a good question. I mean, is there a way to do it where we don't spoil? Like, it's not we say spoiler.
I don't think anybody would be spoiled by
But I mean, without
Vonnegut
saying,
books, though. We're not talking about Game of Thrones.
but Vonnegut books, like, it shouldn't be like about, oh, I can't
Spoiling.
believe this happened to that character. Like,
if you can't enjoy the book because you know where it's going, you should be reading a different book.
I agree with that,
Yeah.
especially with
spoiler
Vonnegut.
alert, but also, even if you haven't read the books we're talking about, you can safely listen, and it would probably only intrigue you to read it.
Let me tell you this: if you want to spoil any, I'll post. I guess no, I'm not going to post what Vonnegut books I read. I don't care that much. But if you want to comment on Vonnegut books yourself on the podcast and spoil them for me because I haven't read all of them, you can do that as revenge. Yeah, that's fine. So go ahead, Luke. Spoil away. Spoiler alert. Officially.
So I think in Sirens of Titan, the basic realization by the end is that Earth and all of us on it are some aliens, like an alien spaceship broke down and needed a special part made, and they realized the only way they can make it this far from home is to like make a planet like evolve into intelligent life enough to be technological and then make the part for them.
Right.
And they would just like subtly control things to make that happen.
Yeah, to get to that point.
And they're aliens, so they can wait a few like hundreds of thousands.
But I think
of
they were
years.
robot aliens too.
Yeah.
They're like cyborgs at that point.
Time
So
doesn't
like,
matter. It's just like
If
we
it's
need
it's
to
just
do this.
quicker, yeah. Oh well, it'll take 2 million years to go back. It'll only take 1 million years to turn these monkeys into humans. So we'll just do that
Exactly,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I'll just live on Titan for a while.
But just rereading the beginning of Sirens of Titan, one of my favorite Kurt Vonnegut type things. It's almost like this like mystical like buzz comes over your head once you start settling into a Vonnegut world, because he starts throwing like weird details at you without fully explaining them, and like you just find yourself like kind of like somebody like turned you upside down.
What's it
and
like,
left
Luke?
and right, and then when you stand
What's it
back
like?
up, you're like, it's sort of like a hazy, pinky, starry like.
What's it like?
Lobby, like.
What's it like?
I don't know. I just feel like I'm in space.
Yeah.
Sorry, you
No,
said
it's-
like a lot.
Well, you kept saying, "What's it like?" So I kept saying, "It's like."
I know because you were stuck in a like loop.
A like Luke loop.
Which
You
is
were
what
making
you get
a-
stuck in when you read Vonnegut. It's like a like loop of like you're spinning in space and you can't find up.
Well, it's kind of like a mind adventure almost when you read his work.
Roller
because
coaster,
and one thing I'll say, if you haven't read his work, definitely try it out because it's.
What would you recommend as like a key in?
Well, first of all, his books aren't difficult to read in the sense that most of them aren't that long, honestly. So you can get into them pretty easily. You can read them pretty quickly, and I think if you really just kind of, are open to maybe a different message than what you've heard, you can get a lot out of it. So, I mean, in terms of books to start with, sort of depends, I think, on what you're into going in. But I think, I think Player Piano is not a bad one to start with. It's his first one. It's not his best one, but it's still pretty good. And I think particularly the message in it about like the value of like human labor and human work it resonates even stronger today than it did in the 50s. So that might be a good one to start with.
That's the one. Yeah. So that's one I've actually read. So I would vote for that one to talk about.
Yeah.
But
Well, no, yeah. What do you think about that, Johnny? I think that's a good one to start with, right?
yeah, I read it and I remember thinking it was really good, but it wasn't an original premise so much. And reading about it, Googling about it, I forget who, but somebody accused him of stealing it from Orwell or Huxley in one of his stories. He goes, yeah, totally ripped off that specific story. But when I was researching that story, they ripped it off from this Russian writer also. So, yeah, I can rip off a rip-off. Fuck you. But,
Yeah,
right.
That checks out.
there's a quote from Player Piano that I think is more relevant today. So, like we were
There you
talking
go.
about the timeless of it.
Sure.
Those who live by the electronics die by electronics. Sic semper tyrannis. It's fucking
Wow.
badass. Who in the 50s could have called that,
Wow, yeah, talk about Jesus.
Here's another Player Piano quote.
As Luke says by reading off his cell phone.
Right?
Yeah,
And we're all
exactly. I'm on
communicating.
electronics.
Yeah.
I want to stand as close to the edge as I can without going over. Out on the edge, you see all kinds of things you can't see from the center.
That
Oh
was
shit!
that was
Joe
another.
just had that quote.
That was the next quote I was gonna say.
I have
We're
that one
friends.
written down,
we all,
too.
Like, pick
Yeah.
out the same quotes.
You wrote it down too.
Yeah, we all have good reads. It's great.
We're all on Goodreads, yeah.
But
So
let's
we're
just
either all equally kind of dumb or
Yeah. Well, for any listeners out there, if you're not on Goodreads already, like, share and subscribe. Go ahead, Johnny.
Thanks, Joe. Just quickly, player piano. If anyone doesn't know what an actual player piano is, it's those pianos that have like a music box device in it, and the keys play themselves
Right.
when you crank it up. So it looks like it's it's playing. It plays on its own. You can pretend to play the music, but really the piano's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote a story where there's really no jobs left. Everything's been automated, and about 3% of the workforce are the engineers that like maintain and design these devices in factories, and the vast majority of people are just doing public works jobs to keep them busy because there's just things are good enough that no one starves, but nobody has anything really.
And the public works program, you're either in the reeks or the wrecks, and one group digs holes, I think, and the other group fills them in.
Yeah. No, you dig ditches. So you have to dig a ditch from
yeah.
like New York City to Albany, and then the other crew comes in and fills it.
Yeah.
Just to keep you busy. Yeah.
Well, it's this idea.
They can't just give it away without any work, right?
Well, it's like then what do you do with yourself? Like if
well, that's what they would worry about. They would worry about people sitting with so much free time,
right?
And like maybe thinking through things.
And that becomes a political
way to control people's thinking,
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what breaks down in the novel.
Yeah, because the main character is one of these engineers, but he has this romanticized idea of buying a farmhouse and retiring and living on the land,
right?
And, like being a Reeks and Rex guy, but with meaningful stuff coming out. Basically, like, whoa, man, I can make all my.
The work he does will pay off, right?
Yeah, but even he several times in the novel admits it's an absurd pipe dream that's not going to happen, but he's working towards it. And I think a lot of people felt that way then, but more so now that because it's harder to check out of our, like, you can't be like, I don't like this whole consumer debt-based fractional banking system. Can I just take my money and check out and buy a piece of land and get left alone? It's like, no, not really. You could do that for a couple of years, but you can't get away from it. And
right.
So.
Yeah, player piano is really relevant.
I think that's a good
because that's coming.
Yeah,
self-driving cars getting rid of
it's already here.
All of the truck drivers in the country. Imagine that.
It's already here, and it's one of so it's one of those messages about like in what he was writing about at the time is this idea of like the value of one's own ability to sort of work and contribute, and it's just one of those themes in his writing that becomes or has become more and more and more relevant as the years have gone by. And what's interesting, too, you see it, like, at different stages. I think one of his later, maybe one of his last fiction novels, Galapagos, I think did I give you a copy of that?
You haven't. You gave me Sirens of Titan, so I'm going to give that back to you.
Yeah.
And then you give me Galapagos.
But Galapagos, not to spoil it, but he has this, spoiler alert, no, he has this...
not to spoil it, but to spoil it?
He has this, there's this device in it, I forget what it's called, like, it sounds like multivac, but it's not because that's
a confundulum or something.
I forget. It's like multi something, and it's basically like an early like internet like tablet. And he doesn't describe it that way because that didn't exist in the mid '80s or whatever. But he was totally on the right track.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to see.
So yeah, he nailed it. This is a real problem we have because there's a group of people in the world, which I've used the phrase before. I think Chomsky coined it, the precariat. It's a precarious proletariat because when you look at global economics, you can move money, capital around the world now to invest in stuff. You can move your products around the world, so pricing and stuff. But the one thing that you can't compete with against management is your labor. It's static. Like I can't compete with a cheaper factory in Thailand because I'm in America and there's only so much. I have to work for a certain amount and this and that. So. When that ability to rely on your own labor, which he lays out in Player Piano, is this natural desire people have to make or be in control or to do something meaningful, that's going away. Fast food workers, they're starting to they're using this big tax break now to roll out automation. That's not even a job people wanted, but at least it was something so when you gave them the money, they're like, I hate that job, but I earned this money for the things I want in life. But now it's just going to be, well, you have no way to earn the money, so what are you going to do? Just stand there and wait for someone to give you something? Or like, and that... I don't know if it's as intentional as it was in Player Piano, but they try to get together and organize and change things. And obviously people that have something to lose in a change of the system are like, I know we're going to prevent that from happening.
Right.
Getting a little conspiracy-minded here. But our society's obviously not geared towards that. It doesn't have to be malicious. It's just profit-driven and, freedom of choice. People are going to choose to make more money and be more efficient until we have no more truck drivers, no more fast food workers, no more waiters. And what do we do then? Our government's going to just start big Reeks and Rex programs? Like, well, here's your universal basic income. We don't really need your energy to justify it, but we got to do something to decide who gets it. So go walk a dog for 3
that,
hours.
Like, if, let's say, everybody's getting a universal basic income, which would be they get provided with enough to live and eat.
That's what the Reeks and Rex pretty much were. Yeah, you got a pittance, but everything was made, you know what I mean, so cheaply and effectively you could still stay alive.
Do you think if that were to be the case, would more people sort of figure themselves out and lead the best life, or would too many people just freak out at the emptiness and the meaninglessness because they're not given a schedule to follow and just freak out?
It could be either. You can have both. You could have structure for people that need it, and you could have, not for people that, like, you could go work on an artist colony that's very freeform, or you could go join an AmeriCorps kind of thing, where you wake up every day and you have a goal. We're going to build this bridge. We're going to clear this road. We're going to, clean this well, whatever. But the problem is that doesn't work unless you're post-scarcity. Our economy is based on scarcity. Something's of value because I want it, and there's only so much. 10 people want something, there's only one of. So that's how you decide the value of it. So you can't really just dole out everything evenly and fairly unless there's no scarcity anymore. Because then you're just going to be like, well, I know we're supposed to do it fairly, but these guys aren't really doing anything. They're just building some road in rural North Dakota, so they're not going to get the caviar. We're going to leave that in San Francisco and New York. I mean, that's essentially why communism failed, for the same reason. It's hard to be really fair. You do need some kind of supercomputer.
Right. Speaking of fairness and equality, too, Vonnegut wrote a story called Harris and Bergeron.
Oh, that's probably one of his best pieces of writing, in my opinion.
And so I realized, like, you could interpret that two different ways.
We can link that too, because it's a short story.
I found it online. Actually, there are a lot of YouTube videos of people reading it too.
Sure,
it's short enough. It's like a 5-minute read.
Right.
It's about this concept of complete equality of outcome. So if you're stronger, you have government mandated straps of weights weighing you down and keeping your arms from being more effective just because you were born stronger. If you're smarter, there are these devices that are hooked into your brain that keep you from thinking too hard about any one thing. If you're prettier, you have to
hit you in the head with a baseball bat.
No, not quite. But you have to wear, like, ugly masks and make your face look ugly. And when you get caught not doing these things, you get fined, you get put in prison, things like this.
Yeah.
And so it was just like a really, like, disturbing view of what equality of outcome can look like if you really enforce it.
Yeah.
And so some people think that's this argument against communism, like, look at these philosophies, this is what you get when you follow it.
Right.
And then other people thought that was his sort of, like, comical way to say, this is what people think communism is, like, but they're over-exaggerating, like, because he made it so ridiculous.
But that's what he does. He over-exaggerates to expose that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So my read on it was that it was a genuine critique of Marxism and a genuine critique of equality of outcome thinking.
Do you know what year it was published?
I think it was... I really don't know. I think it was in 60-something.
We'll have our researchers...
Well, the idea behind it is sound theoretically. What's the one line they always use to sum it up? From each by his ability to each by his need? Like...
that sounds smart.
Logically, that makes sense. Okay,
it's not quite that. It's something like that.
Well, to boil it down to all of Marx's thoughts of one sentence is basically, to get rid of class. But going forward, that if Luke's really good at music, he should be out there spreading his music and teaching people. But he doesn't need 6 houses to do it. If he only
instead,
needs
he's
one
cracking
house,
a Moravian porter.
Right.
But see, that's the problem. You don't need a beer. So. And you're not really good at making beer. Even if you were really good at making beer, you don't need as much.
No, we do need a beer. That's why we're cracking one.
This is also the philosophy of, I think it's the philosopher Peter Singer. I could be off on that, but he says something like, no, it's not him, it's someone else, but every dollar spent on anything but the essentials of surviving is a dollar that has a starving child's blood on it.
Well, figuratively, definitely.
It's not wrong. It's definitely not wrong.
That's what I mean. It's like, of course it's true, but like, I don't know how you would rectify that
Well,
from reality.
you can make that argument. You could say, Luke, you pouring this beer right now, how dare you not put that money towards
But I already had it.
saving. But I want more.
Joe, you're making me feel bad. I just
Luke,
want my beer.
You're basically pouring blood
Joe,
into our
I
glass.
need my beer. Let me pour the beer.
You're absolutely right, though.
No, but that's. I mean, there is some truth there in a
There's definitely
sense.
some truth there. My thought on it is it's a little bit too black and white. This is
The problem is people throw that out the window where they don't even want to think about it, and it's like.
Sure.
I
I
think
think you should think about it once in a while, and I think Vonnegut did too.
I think he definitely did.
I think his books make me more of the kind of person that would think about details like that.
Yeah.
The Peter Singer angle, he's this Australian philosopher, is like every time we do something like crack a beer and spend money on going out to dinner, those type things, it's like you're watching a kid drown in a shallow pond.
Man, this guy's heavy on the imagery.
Because
Jesus.
it's like the kid's drowning in a shallow pond, so it's no risk to you to go out there and try and save it.
Yeah.
Yet here you are spending $100 going out to dinner for Valentine's Day with your wife or something.
Yeah.
When you could have donated that to someplace that
Well,
went towards.
but do you
It's
think
because
that's
it's so overwhelming, you just reject it. Like I knew a guy who
Right.
was a missionary with his wife when I used to work at this country club, and they stayed members of the country club because they liked to play tennis there, and they used to have like a really nice house, $1 million house in that neighborhood. It was a really fancy area, and they downsized to like a little ranch, and they bought a place in Africa that they would go to like 6 months out of the year because he was a doctor, and he would do volunteer work, and they went from being wealthy, like upper class, upper middle class people to being lower class in what they could afford and stuff because they went.
Yeah.
So it was like, wow, you're really doing that. Instead of trying to buy a boat, you're out there doing that stuff. But then I saw a YouTube video where this I guess social justice warrior was saying to like, attention white people that want to help people of color. If you want to be an ally, is the term, is to give up your house, sign over the deed to a black
Right,
person,
I saw
like
that, yeah. You wanna
take
be
your
woke.
children out of your will and put some disadvantaged people in there. And it's like, well, that's like, it's just too much. First of all, that's insane, and I'm helping the other half of the 1% of the world population. Is that what you do? Try to help people in your own society that are being fucked over, but when compared
I
to the
think
rest of
that's-
the world, they're
that's-
way
that's
better off? Or do I go to some
fundamentally
place that
against
I've
their
never?
philosophy, yeah.
Do I go to some place I've never been and do I try to think I'm helping people? Am I any better than the Christian missionaries that came hundreds of years ago? They're like, oh, we'll help you. Just find Jesus, and you can't lay with these many women, and you can't be this part of your culture, and just fuck them up. Like, so it's hard to know. Am I helping? Am I hurting? It's more fun to just sit back and watch the monkeys play and Vonnegut.
But also try your best to
comment on
figure out what you're doing. And
Yeah,
if it's-
you can help on different scales.
Yeah.
You can help on different levels.
and you
It's-
can know what your
I
scale
mean,
is.
absolutism in any context is usually crap.
Which is what Vonnegut in the quote, Joe, that you opened the episode with.
I like that
Vonnegut
quote,
talks
by the
about
way.
the totalitarian mind.
Yeah.
So let me just give a little background in that quote you read, Joe, because it's from Mother Night.
Yes.
And that was the first Vonnegut book that I read as like an adult.
I
you
think
know?
that's also his first great book.
I don't know. There was something about it where I started it like 5 to 6 times and didn't really.
Really?
It didn't pick up, but I also wasn't in a good schedule to pick up a book at the moment.
Yeah.
But then I started reading it a few nights before I flew to San Francisco, and so I had 6 hours of reading on the way there, and then I had the 2 weeks there to like read it on free time, and then
Yeah.
I finished it in the middle of a flight on the way back.
That should do it, yeah.
And something about, I was reading on a plane, so there were no distractions, and I just really got into it. And then I read it again, like after I finished it, I just like basically reread it
Yeah.
while skimming a few parts.
Yeah.
So in that scene, the main character is basically a U.S. spy who is sent to Germany to pretend to be this Nazi. He had he was half German, right?
He had
the
German
character.
origins,
And
yeah.
he spoke fluent German and all that.
He made like the perfect plant to be
Yeah.
like, oh, pretend you're a Nazi so you
Right.
can secretly
So he was
be a
approached
spy.
by whatever U.S. agency. And
A guy.
a
Yeah.
guy and given this mission to be a spy over there, And the
Right.
idea of the book is he was such a good spy. He was so convincing.
Well,
And
he was a
famous.
radio like propagandist.
Right. He became famous as a
He
propagandist.
was a public figure,
and a good one at that. A great one at that.
Well, he was a hero. People, not
a hero of the Nazis.
Not only the Nazis, but like just German people, like everyday, German people who are like, oh, this guy's validating this whole psychotic, system that we got going on here.
All the while inside, he's still thinking, I'm a spy. This is not the real me. I'm just pretending to be this.
Right.
But one of the quotes I love is like, Vonnegut writes, but, espionage gives certain men the opportunity to behave in ways they could only imagine before.
Yes. Yeah, like putting on like an act sort of. And actually another
That's
one.
not the exact quote, by the way.
Well, actually, one of the other quotes, which is a fantastic quote, it's one of my favorite Vonnegut quotes.
The opening line, right?
It's close to the opening line. I think he prefaces it by saying, and this I'm not going to get exactly right, but it's something like, I don't know if the moral of this story, it's in the preface, like before the book begins. I don't know if this moral is any better than any of the others in my other books, but I know it more true than any of the others. Like,
I thought it was,
I know it more
if
clearly.
my work has a theme, it's a relatively simple one.
It might be that too,
Like,
I don't know.
I think that's something like
But
that.
the quote is, we are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be.
Do you know anything about him adding that in later?
Well, I think that's in the preface, so...
Okay, so I think the preface got... I read something...
Well, prefaces can be added in
That's
later
what I mean,
editions
yeah.
or edited, sure, yeah.
But I think maybe he wanted to make more explicit at the beginning, like the point of the book.
Well, that is the moral of the book. Or that's a big part of the book.
I think a big part of this book is just that, like, humans are capable of many ways of being,
Yeah,
From awful to...
And terrible in
terrible.
some ways, yeah.
I mean, but even when you're being terrible, you can tell yourself you're doing righteousness,
Right.
Like, you have to be careful about what you define as, like, the right thing, because given enough brainwashing, like, horrible things can be...
Or just
framed as
even
the
like
right thing.
deferment. I mean, you see this as the problem where people say, like, well, I'm not the one who, really... That was actually there's a great quote in the most recent season of Game of Thrones where one of the characters is like, oh yeah, I kept telling myself that, like, even as they were burning people alive, like, well, I'm not the one lighting the fires. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just doing my job. Like, I'm not the one,
Yep.
rounding them up. I'm just... And he just goes
Right.
through them, and it's like, yeah, there's something really to be said there about, like, putting up those blinders and deferring that.
We're very capable of justifying horrible things because we don't want to go against the masses.
Well, and
So-
this becomes... No, go ahead, Johnny.
So what you're saying is, since you're not a crooked cop shooting an unarmed black person, it doesn't bother you. That's what you're saying, Joe?
I'm saying that...
Dude, that's such... Like, we have to just establish this real quick. There's an argument technique out there, and it's a weapon that
So
there's
that's
an
what you're
easy
saying?
solution for, but you just have to look out for it because they can sneak it in very...
Whoa. Who's this they, Luke? Are you saying
Okay,
all
Johnny.
people that don't look like you aren't...
So Johnny's demonstrating the technique right now, and the technique is
Oh,
whatever
God.
someone says to you, you say, oh, so you're saying, and you, like,
you say something else.
misrepresent
yeah.
everything they say and pretend like that's what you're fighting against.
Or that's what they said.
You make a summation
Sometimes
for
it is
them.
what they said.
Yeah, but a lot of times it's not. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
Even
it's
if
like,
it-
oh, so
even
you're
if-
saying that, like, blah 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 blah. It's like those were none of the words I said.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Even if they do get it accurately, you can spin it. Like if you're trying to explain unemployment rates in a community, you can just turn around and be like, oh, so what you're saying is blacks don't have jobs or something. It's like, well, that tone made it sound like I don't want them to have jobs, but I mean,
Right.
yeah, that's the name of the book is Black Unemployment or what, So
Right, right.
it's just a way of even just spinning or phrasing their own stance in such a way to focus on the negative.
That's why I think someone like a
Hmm.
Vonnegut would have cut through like the 2018 culture like a warm knife through butter.
I would
Yeah.
have. That's what I mean. I would have loved to.
I
have
wonder if that's
just
why,
gotten his input
I
on the
wonder
last
if that's
couple
Yeah.
years.
Is that why we are where we are? Because those guys like Vonnegut and Carlin and stuff, they came along and they were crushing it for like 50 years.
Yeah.
And that is
I mean,
it one
could
of
be
is
a
it one of
bigger
those
wave than
things
that,
where
but that's part of it, yeah.
But is it one of those things
Well-
where the trees get too big and then when those trees fall down, there's no new small growth trees because they were just too big and they didn't
and the forest
allow.
has to reset itself over time.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's a whole other thing. Getting into like looking at something like why Trump happens, and there's a lot of reasons why Trump
I
happened.
would have loved to hear, though, like
But-
you said, Vonnegut's take on the Trump phenomenon.
because he would have said everything that we've said so far
Vonnegut,
on this
Trump,
podcast about. Trump.
Vonnegut, George Carlin, and Freddie Mercury. The three of them on one of these talking heads show
I
about
tell
the
you
current
what,
state of
if you donate
things.
to
It'd
us
be
on
amazing.
Patreon, we'll try to get all three of them on an episode.
We'll try. Yeah, we'll do our best.
We'll definitely try.
We'll send out
So
the
what
feelers,
you're
you
saying
know?
is you can raise the dead.
Well, we're
Well, I
saying
guess
we'll
that's
try.
why that is what I was
So what you're
implying,
saying is
yeah.
you're a devil worshiper.
Well, no, remember, we may or may not be undercover genie cops playing the long con
Oh,
on
shit,
you.
that's
You don't
right.
know. Yeah, you gotta stay vigilant
I'm
these
sorry.
next
I'll
60 years or so.
I should stop interrupting too. Then go ahead. Joe.
No, you can interrupt. It's fine. We'll just interrupt you.
For the Mother Night closure,
Yeah.
what I like about how it applies to today and why it sort of rang more true to me was he says right in the opening, after the "we are what we pretend to be," this sort of realization that, hey, if I had been born in Nazi Germany, then I probably would have
Right.
been raised and become a Nazi.
Especially if he's doing it regardless, as under this guise of like, oh, I'm
Well, it's like the
secretly a
irony is
spy.
like he's not a Nazi, but he's there being a Nazi nonetheless, you know?
and it's also ironic because everybody in America loathes him.
Right, and they don't realize he's a spy.
And even when he gets back to America, like after the war, the only people who like these neo-Nazi sympathizers are like, oh my God, you're my hero. Like I can help you, I can protect you, I can blah blah blah. And he's like, oh, these pieces of shit. Like these are the worst people, but they're the only ones who, and they really do. They like objectively like love this guy and care about him and want to help him. But they're terrible Nazis too. So it's this real like weird. It's a very uncomfortable contradiction that like he eventually like keeps trying to come to terms with, and there's no way to come to terms with it in the end. It's like,
Well, I think the way to come to terms with it is with a quote like the Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote from the Gulag Archipelago.
can you say all of that again 10 times
Alexander
fast?
Solzhenitsyn.
Wait.
I don't
Can
know
you
how to say that Russian name.
Say it with a
properly.
Russian accent and say
Yeah,
the
say-
German.
say- I will
not
the
do that.
German.
Say it all-
That's your
No, you
domain,
gotta do
No,
Johnny.
it. Come on.
No, say it all in a Russian accent. It will flow much because I didn't hear what the fuck.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
All right, you went
What's
Italian. You went cartoon Italian chef there, which is why I wanted you
Yeah,
to do it.
you went the fucking chef from the Muppets or whatever.
Spicy meatball.
What's the name of the book?
It's the Gulag Archipelago. It's about the
Okay.
gulags in Soviet Russia. And his quote.
I thought it was
which
a gulag.
I actually first stumbled upon
Luke's
this
from
quote
Canada.
not from anything political, but from like Buddhist teachers that I follow. They say like the line dividing good from evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who among us wants to destroy part of their own heart?
Wait,
right?
who quoted that? Who said that?
That's Solzhenitsyn, but
Okay.
the Buddhist teachers I
Solzhenitsyn.
follow, like originally is where I heard the quote from, and then I've heard the quote more as a political thing, talking about people who are like always making other out of their political opponents, like these guys are Nazis. These
Yeah,
are not-
otherizing.
And Kurt Vonnegut is saying in this book, like, if you were born in Germany, you would be a Nazi, and you'd probably be good at it because you're a smart, skilled person. So you would have been shaped to be a really smart, skilled Nazi. Let me see here. Oh, okay. He also speaks so much about truth, like speaking truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like like his characters say, the two things I love from Mother Night. Him and his friend get really drunk once, and the friend's kind of like looking at him all sad and goes, like, I'm going to tell you something true. I think he says, this is one of those moments when somebody really speaks the truth. One of those rare moments. People hardly ever speak the truth, but now I am speaking the truth. And then his friend said, I love my motorcycle more than I love my wife.
I remember that. Yeah, the guy loved the fucking motorcycle. Yeah,
And
it was
just
a nice
like,
bike.
He's like drunk there. They think they're going to die in this bunker or something.
Right.
And he's just like, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm pretty sure I love my motorcycle more than my wife. You know?
Right,
Like,
and that's just like we're gonna die type
yeah,
truth.
like why
yeah.
not just say it?
Right.
I've been thinking it for 5 years since I got
Right.
that precious motorcycle.
I have one more quote. Well, I have a couple more quotes, but I have another one along the lines of just thinking about a little bit more about like coming back to the earlier quote from Mother Night about kind of the function of human brain and the human brain. And this is a little different because this is from that book Galapagos, which I highly recommend.
You've been trying to get me to read that for years.
You will be all over that. So here's the quote, and just a little background, a brief preface. Galapagos takes place 1 million years from now, after humanity has been wiped out, and that's not a spoiler because that's stated like right at the beginning of the novel.
Yeah.
And
also, we already spoiler alert. No worries.
That's true. Yeah, and it's narrated by this like ghost basically, who's just like around. Observing what humanity now is, which they, through a series of events, evolve into furry seal creatures that are just about like lying in the sun and eating fish.
Turns out being like these limby monkey things doesn't really work well.
So,
Joe, I think they like to be called Armenians. Oh, shots fired.
Wow. Goodbye, Armenian listeners.
Just kidding, guys.
I was going to say, did we have any? All right, so here's the quote. Just about every adult human being back then had a brain weighing 3 kilograms. There was no end to the evil schemes that a thought machine that oversized could imagine and execute. So I raise the question, although there is nobody around to answer it, can it be doubted that 3-kilogram brains were once nearly fatal defects in the evolution of the human race? That, in my opinion, was the most diabolical aspect of those old-time big brains. They would tell their owners, in effect, here's a crazy thing we could actually do. Probably, but we would never do it, of course. It's just fun to think about. And then, as though in trances, the people would really do it. Have slaves fight each other to the death in the Colosseum, or burn people alive in the public square for holding opinions which were locally unpopular, or build factories whose only purpose was to kill people in industrial quantities, or to blow up whole cities, and on and on. Kurt Vonnegut, Galapagos. But that sums up so much, I feel like, of what we've kind of touched upon in different aspects.
That he wasn't scared to address the awful capabilities that humans have.
And as seen both historically and moving forward. Like, talking about that Russian fucking submarine.
Sure. That's
what that is. That's a crazy fucking idea that covers all those checklist points.
And it's to me no different than two competing tribes in a jungle throwing rocks at each other.
Except that the rocks are salted nukes.
Except the rocks now are equating energy and mass to just release pure energy and then spray radioactive. It's
objectively psychotic.
But is it surprising?
No, that's his point, though.
His point is it's not
we've
surprising.
figured out how to do that. We all have supercomputers in our pockets. We're talking right now 1,000 miles apart in real time.
We think we are. Well, I don't know if you're real.
He is part genie, perhaps, at least.
But I'm saying we're doing all that shit. But at the same time, when I travel somewhere new in the U.S., which is, let's say, a first world nation, when I travel to like a new city or town I haven't been to, and I go to get a glass of water from someone's kitchen, I go, can I drink out of the tap? And they either go, yeah, it's fine. Or they go, oh, no, yeah, it smells like sulfur. Don't do it.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
That's a problem they had in fucking ancient Greece, was lead in the water. And how are we still dealing with that? But we figured out we're sending rockets to Mars. We're sending electric cars to Mars. But like our water is either lead or chlorine. Those are your two choices.
And it's getting worse just because, well, for a lot of reasons. But you would like to think that there are ways to address these issues and improve them, and there are. But technology and progress often develops unevenly. It's like, yeah, you may develop technological communications, like being able to talk on Skype and cell phones and stuff.
Well, technology and ethics, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Way faster than you figure out, like, oh, hey, we should stop burning coal for power because the planet's fucking melting. You know what I mean? And it's like, maybe that will catch up, but all of a sudden we'll be like, oh, yeah, there's no more water left. It's all dirty and everybody's starving.
But I think we're naturally
Doesn't that
wired
make you
to
a Nazi,
know
though, looking back? Because it's like, well, look at all those showers you took. You were one of the wasteful, indoctrinated Nazi people.
Well, there you go. Every hot shower you take has a starving child's blood running through it. Like, where do you draw that line? But I think Kurt Vonnegut's main point is that humans are... I'm going to give one last quote from Mother Night, because I think I just read this, Joe, and I think that's what you were thinking about the true more than any other thing.
Right.
He says, I will tell you the one thing I really believe out of all the things there are to believe. All people are insane. They will do anything at any time, and God help anybody who looks for reasons. It's sort of like
Yeah,
like
it covers
we're
Yeah.
all and this is the Solzhenitsyn thing. It's like, don't look out to the world for the evil in the world. First, like, identify it within yourself. I think that would be sort of the, like, identify with the shadow version of yourself,
Right.
and then you'll understand what makes people susceptible to evil
Right.
outside you.
And one other quote I'm just going to throw in for the record, because I feel like to somebody who's not familiar with him at all, like you might hear a lot of this and think like, oh man, this guy's like dark, or you might think negatively of it perhaps, and it's not like
There's a playful energy to it.
Well, that's not his intention. So another quote from Sirens of the Titan, which I really love, is, "A purpose of human life, no matter who is controlling it, is to love whoever is around to be loved." Like,
I think that was in the beginning, because I think
it
just
is,
read
yeah.
it recently. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I mean, he was all about, as well, getting to a point where even if you can't get to all the answers or all the solutions, you should still do your best to have the greatest net good for yourself and everybody around
Yeah,
you.
you already know what's good, so do more of that before you, like, freak
Yeah.
out about the meaning of the big picture. Just do more
and,
local
and
good.
make that negatively snowball, yeah.
Think globally, act locally. Is that what you're telling us, Joe?
Is that the bumper sticker? I think we promised
Yeah.
that you would make bumper stickers at some point.
We've made a lot of promises.
No,
I
we
know.
we said we would make one that said "Don't squeeze the genie." I didn't
that's a
say
good
I would
one.
do it.
Johnny, you're really into history, so I'm going to read something from Sirens of Titan that you would like. It was about this idea that, like, history became too big. This guy pretended to see into the year 10 million.
Oh, that's too far, yeah.
And he said, in the year 10 million, there would be a tremendous house cleaning. All records relating to the period between the death of Christ and the year 1 million AD would be hauled to dumps and burned. This would be
awesome.
done because museums and archives would be crowding the living right off the earth. The million-year period to which the burned junk related would be summed up in the history books in one sentence, which was, following the death of Jesus Christ, there was a period of readjustment that lasted for approximately 1 million years. So right now, folks,
that's
we
amazing.
we are in a period of readjustment.
But that speaks too to, like,
Trump and
But that
everybody
speaks
else.
too to, like, the fact, like, and this was
It's
something
true.
else that comes up of, like, how, like, on the cosmic scale insignificant we are. Like, you look at, like, Neil deGrasse Tyson, like, has a great video where, like, he shows the human calendar and how human existence
in
is
1
like
year, right?
is like the last second of the last.
It's like a minute before New Year's Eve.
It's like a
midnight,
few
yeah.
seconds, I think, before, like, the ball drops on New Year's Eve. Like, that's humanity on the cosmic time scale.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's sort of what he's getting at. Like, look, what are we doing here? Like, let's not destroy ourselves, because that's it then. Like,
Yeah.
it's over.
Well, do you want to do something significant enough and meaningful enough that it's worthy of, like, not summating it into the word readjustment period?
Right.
Because
which is
think of it, like,
good to keep in
Beethoven,
mind.
Mozart,
Yeah.
Mahler, great writers, great artists, like, all of that being summed up, all the great technology being summed up into there was a readjustment period.
Right, right.
That's kind of
Right.
sad.
That's very sad. But he's saying that all without saying it.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. That's really hard to do as a writer, but he does it so well.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
This is because there's some time travel, like, aspect to
In a lot
Sirens
of his books,
Titan. And the idea of that quote was this future that somebody claimed to have seen.
Right.
Turns out he was lying, but
Point taken, though.
yeah, point
for sure.
taken.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what's weird? But you were right about the time thing, because we don't know what's the point they're gonna pick. It's just arbitrary. They're gonna pick Jesus till year 3000. Like, what is the
Well,
the
we
actual...
do that as well.
right?
Where we say, like, the medieval period, and people are like, when is that? It's like, I don't know, when did Rome fall? Like, around then.
Isn't it weird to think
It's
that?
like, that, no, that's not that.
Isn't it weird
but-
to think that you, Newton, like Julius Caesar, all these guys sat around reading, like, ancient Greek texts, being like, wow, these old dead guys had some shit figured out. Then you think
Yeah.
about Caesar or Newton were so far removed from you, but they had that same experience of, like, yeah, I guess I got to figure out what they meant because they've been dead for so fucking long.
Right,
And,
right.
It's just, where's that arbitrary point? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he really tapped into these ideas where you're like, you read that and you're like, oh, I see what he's saying. He's really pointing to an idea that I should be more cognizant of. Like, I should keep in mind, certainly, in terms of, like, what are we really doing here, and what can we really accomplish or fail to accomplish, is just kind of like, monkey-esque people mucking about.
Yeah.
I have another quote for you if you want.
Sure. I think we should get to the segments soon, though. We're over an hour in right now.
Crap! I forgot about the segments.
Yeah. You want to save your quote for after? We're an hour and 10 in right now.
Okay, I'll save it. I have an hour and 25 on my count.
Well, that's the Skype, not the file.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's not bad. Well, so unfortunately, I didn't find a fact or fiction because I did so much Vonnegut research. So I don't know if Luke got drunk and figured out on his end what to do, but I assume the genie's coming packing.
I do have a Would You Rather.
Yeah.
I'm more interested to hear your response than Luke's. I'm not going to lie.
Why is that?
You'll see.
Yeah.
Why don't you throw the quote out then while we wait for him?
Okay, so the quote is, let's see here. I've seen it once before in a rat, and I see it now in men. Once one gets a taste for its own kind, it can spread through the pack like a wildfire, mindlessly chomping and biting at their own hinds. Nothing but the taste on flesh of their mind. You know the thing about a rat? It's got lifeless eyes. Black eyes like a doll's eyes. Don't seem to be living at all.
That's awesome.
All right, that's not a Kurt Vonnegut quote, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, in fact, if you know where that's
not
from...
even the quote from... Yeah, go ahead.
If you know where that's from before I explain it, that's awesome.
It's not even from the movie, by the way.
All right, guys, I just got back from peeing, and I have no idea what's going on.
Joe was just doing the speech that Quint does in Jaws.
But it wasn't...
about the attack on the USS Indianapolis, but the Charlie Kelly version from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Yes, it wasn't even the original movie version.
So, Joe, I don't know if you know this, but I also have a recording of you reading this quote from Jaws.
I remember vaguely doing
during one of the betas.
Yeah.
By the way, guys, listeners, when we say betas, we mean like
one of the small boys we keep around to carry beers for us, right?
We mean the attempted podcast we did, like, before we actually started publishing things, where we would just, like, start hanging out and drinking and recording.
Yeah.
I have a recording of you doing that.
Really?
I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but...
Well, put it in the pocket, like...
You know, the story that he's telling in Jaws is a true story. It's a real thing. It's not just from
really?
Jaws. Yeah, the USS Indianapolis got, I think, torpedoed or kamikazed in World War II, and a few thousand soldiers went into the water. But a school of sharks found them because they were in the Pacific, and it took a couple of days for them to get rescued. And there's only like a few hundred left because they just were floating in a big pile, and the sharks would just, when they got hungry again, come back and eat a few of you, and there's nothing you could do.
That's like a Vonnegut story, dude.
Yeah, that's why I thought you picked the quote. And so
of course that's why I picked
Charlie
the quote.
Kelly
it
telling
very
the joke
Vonnegut
version with
imagery,
rats.
yeah.
It's funny,
But
that
Joe,
was a real one of the most fucked up shark attack stories.
That's crazy, dude.
Which is why that character hated sharks, which makes sense in context of the movie.
Yeah.
So, Joe, is there any fruit pieces you want to grab to get back on the Vonnegut train?
I mean, to conclude about Vonnegut, because I do want to get to the Would You Rather. I would just say, if you haven't read any of his works, you could even start with some of his short stories or his essays. But I think Player Piano is a good one to go with starting out. If you want to get into something a little deeper, like Mother Night is a good place to start. Cat's Cradle is a great novel. Have you read Cat's Cradle? That's a great one too. Cat's Cradle, I think, is right up there with Sirens. With Slaughterhouse 5 is one of his best works.
I should reread that.
Yeah, it covers a lot of what we're talking about. That's the one
where he keeps the cat in the little crib, right?
So, I would just say
it's hard to hear Johnny and see Johnny.
I know it is. It is kind of a little bit.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, a lot going on here. So I would say, give him a shot. His style might not be.
It's probably not for everybody.
It's definitely not for everybody. In all honesty, but I think his messages are so.
You know how I think
poignant
it's not
today.
for, especially, is and I really respect these type of people and how they might get to the type of personality that's like this, but the type of people that are just always very cheery and just always on the bright side of things.
Right. Which is fine.
Even if it's a little bit performative.
Yeah.
There's a sense of hey, that's okay, I can deal with this. Let's, and they always
practice
come up with
the
a
optimist.
positive.
I fucking hate that shit.
But if
well,
they're,
it's easy to hate it, but it's also
but if they're getting through life,
respectable.
yeah. If
I
they-
hate it because I don't have it. Because
No, that's what I mean. Life
You
is
resent it.
life
yeah.
is fucking
Yeah, it's a
insane.
resentment.
So whatever you have to do to get through it, like that, like I'm okay with that as long as you're doing good stuff and you're doing what you
and
can. Like whatever.
I think Vonnegut is more for like people like me. I think the things that I love about Vonnegut is it's a balance of like science and objectivism.
Yeah.
With with a quest for looking for meaning, but also with like a comical like satire on the reality of it, which is like we're in a ridiculous situation. You know, we're little mobile creatures on like a spinning planet in infinity.
All right. So to that
I think
point,
a good test, Joe. Is this a good test? I just want to throw out if somebody like, oh, like I heard you talking about that Vonnegut guy. Is that a book? Like, is that someone I'd enjoy? You just ask them how hard and how far down do you have to push your own existential dread? And when they go, what? Be like, yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
But if they're like,
if
oh,
they don't
yeah,
get what you mean by that question,
if they have any response but what, then be like, yeah, you should check them out. How's that sound, Joe?
that would be
Actually,
pretty
that's
cool.
a really good.
Yeah.
That's a really good like litmus test for like Vonnegut liking.
Yeah. But here's my last quote from Vonnegut, which I think pretty much says not at its essence what he's trying to say, but like where you can kind of go from there with
And
Vonnegut.
by the way, Joe, why I love Vonnegut quotes is no matter how much I pathetically try to like, you know, third beer in the afternoon, like rant about Vonnegut, only a Vonnegut quote can make you go, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
He says it way better than we can analyze what he's saying.
Yeah.
Which is why I took down like 10 different quotes. So mine is just very quickly, I tell you, we are here on Earth to fart around, and don't let anybody tell you different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's not like an overly dark dude. Like
he's dry and tries to make humor out of how ridiculous life is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And we missed the one quote, which is my favorite Vonnegut quote and story, which Joe told me. So can I throw that
about
out?
the doll's eyes, the lifeless eyes?
Okay, so my second favorite one. It was when you're talking about when he was a struggling writer. He had kids he had to feed and stuff. He got a brief stint with Sports Illustrated, writing for them.
Oh yeah, right.
And he was tasked with writing a review about a horse race where the horse jumped the fence, like instead of going around the track,
That's
just went
such a
the other
Vonnegut
way and
story
jumped
already.
out the fence.
Yeah.
And he stared at his desk for like hours and couldn't come up with anything. And he submitted one sentence to his editor, which was, "The horse jumped over the fucking fence and then quit."
That's amazing.
Because he was like, I need a
quote.
job. He's like, I need a job. Like, I need to be responsible and like this and that and blah. But like, just trying to. He's like, can't do it. Like, I can't do this bullshit. I have to go be a writer.
I respect that.
Can I say
so
something
much,
funny
so
too?
deeply though.
Because like I have one more quote too, and I feel like that's a good way to close the Vonnegut circle. And Joe, the quote you gave was so Joe. Johnny, the quote you gave was so Johnny, and the quote I'm about to read is so Luke.
Perfect.
So this quote is from Mother Night. It's almost very connects with the same part of my brain that loves reading Buddhism and things like that. It's also sounding religious, which is why we said Vonnegut is not an atheist by today's standards. You know?
Right.
No young person on earth is so excellent in all respects as to need no uncritical love. Good Lord, as youngsters play their parts in political tragedies with casts of billions, uncritical love is the only real treasure they can look for. That's the side of Vonnegut that's like at the end of the day, that's what you're in anything for. Because you're going to die, you're going to become part of matter again on this spinning rock in infinity, and what the fuck would it mean unless, you know, you're dishing out something good like that.
Right. Yeah, because that's the only difference between like pre-infinity and post-infinity.
Right.
It's like what you do in between.
It's the very small period in between, which by like the alien standards in Vonnegut's own stories are like a meaningless amount of time. It's like you would take a nap while your cell phone charges. They're taking a nap next to Mars while they raise the entire human civilization to build a spaceship part for them.
And that seems insane to us, but it's like that's because we're not cyborg aliens.
Yeah,
no, but also
time is on
look
our
at
scale.
a housefly can live like 20-something hours and reproduce and die.
Right,
and if it stops for 10 minutes to just like, you know, sit on your shoe,
take a dump or something,
and it's like, well, what are you doing, dude?
What are you doing with your life, bro?
Yeah, what are you doing with your life, fly, bro? Like, I don't care because it's not. Okay.
So hopefully we've convinced some people to read Vonnegut.
I would like to think so. I would be very interested if you guys want to post comments. you have questions, or I'm sure I said things about Vonnegut that are maybe not quite 100% accurate or on point. So if you...
I thought that was just well, that was Southern. I thought that was just a disclaimer we always had for this podcast.
It is, but I think it's worth reminding in case somebody stumbles across it the first time, like
Fair enough.
Somebody might just be like, oh, like somebody's reviewing or talking about Vonnegut or something. Let me check. Oh, these guys are drunk assholes. Like, I have some things to say.
I looked out the window when Joe said that.
Drunk
I
assholes?
was like, there's drunk assholes outside.
Nope, they're all in here. Yeah. So
we're going to get to Would You Rather?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't do a research for my segment.
Me neither.
Yeah,
I think we can just really dig into this.
Yeah, okay.
I do want to just let people know before we get into that, me and Joe have just had...
Oh, yeah, we had a beer and we're going to crack a new one, too.
Our other beer. So this beer that we're just finishing now is the from Foothills Brewing. This is part of the beer I grabbed on my beer road trip up the East Coast. And it's called the Moravian Porter. It's pretty low percentage for a porter, eh, Johnny?
No, traditional porters, it's right around there. It's like just under 6%.
What's going on in this? It tastes almost like not hoppy.
So
but...
the Moravians are a religious sect from Germany that moved in the 1800s or some shit. I don't know.
It's almost a little spicy.
They went to Pennsylvania and then they got...
Johnny, you were on such a convincing thing. You're like in the 1800s or some shit. I don't know.
Some shit. I don't remember exactly. But then they got kicked out of Pennsylvania because I think they were too progressive. I think they gave like women small property rights, so everyone freaked out. So they walked down to North Carolina.
Yeah. Wow.
But they're like... They're like the old-timey people from here that you see, like the living history people, like Williamsburg type.
Yeah. The founders.
Yeah, and it's actually a religious sect. Like they have this dodecahedral pointed star that's on the label if you look at it. Because I gave Luke that one. Look at the star he's holding up. That's the Moravian star.
Oh, shit,
that's cool.
Joe,
We'll
their
post
church
a
has
of
a
that,
lot
yeah.
of, and their church.
That's a badass. That's like a 3D star. That's really cool.
Yeah,
look them up.
cool
Post a
graphic.
picture. They're just really cool aesthetically if you're not religious. But so those are
We'll
Moravian
tweet at them.
cookies. Moravian cookies are a type of like ginger cookie they make, and those Moravian spices are what's in that porter.
It's
So
spicy.
it's like
yeah.
cinnamony, nutmeggy kind of.
Definitely, yeah. Tastes like
stuff.
the crust of a pie.
Yeah, that's their Moravian spice blend.
Yeah, definitely some cinnamon or nutmeg.
So
going
that's
on,
like a
for sure.
local, beer
And Joe,
doing the
what's
whole
this
local
beer
thing.
we're about to
Oh,
crush?
so I have a new beer. Speaking of founders, I have a Founders Pale. Oh, it's Pale Joe. That's the name of it. And it's a pale ale brewed with coffee. And the reason why I chose this, actually, throwing it back to Vonnegut, is I was trying to find a beer that would be most Vonnegut. And I should have done more research because I kind of went with the first thing I found, which was that his grandfather actually, I believe, had a brewery pre-Prohibition, and it got shut down when Prohibition went into effect. And that was kind of the end of the family, brewing business. But years later, in like the 70s or 80s or 90s or something, like when he was an established writer, somebody made I think it was called... I forget what it was called, but it's a Vonnegut like beer. They called it the Vonnegut beer, and it was based on his grandfather's original like recipe that he brewed with. And it was apparently the beer that he brewed and the beer that they remade was a lager, but brewed with coffee, which I've actually never had. I've had a coffee stout. I've had a coffee porter. I've never had a coffee lager. I don't even know if they exist, to be honest. So the closest thing I could find. It does. It's the closest thing I could find because I didn't want to just get another coffee stout because we had those on the podcast. So I went with this Founders Pale Joe, which is actually a pale ale brewed with coffee, which I've also never had a pale ale brewed with coffee.
I had last week. I had a Saison Golden Ale, farmhouse ale with coffee. Remember?
With coffee?
Do you have an opener?
Yeah, that was fucking delicious.
Fuck. I do.
I was gonna say an opener can't be far.
Joe, by the way, don't worry when you're buying beer whether it's like a repeat for the podcast.
Oh, I'm not.
Get it.
I'm not. It's not that I'm worried. It's just I want to have
We're bound to repeat.
No, and we should repeat. I think good beers are worth repeating, but I think also you don't want to get into not even a cycle, but like
Keep it diverse.
Yeah, you want to keep it diverse. Like,
have we had a sour
you can bring back beers,
on the
but
podcast yet?
no, we should bring in some sours, for example.
I had a sour last. I've had a sours on the podcast.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, but we should as well.
By the way,
that's fine.
the mics Joe and I are currently speaking on
that
are
smells
just
good.
these like clip-on collar mics, which at least gets a little closer. Hopefully our audio is sounding better. We might take these with us. We're going to go to a beer release from Other Half Brewery.
That's right.
This weekend.
Yeah,
and,
very excited for that.
Hopefully we'll just record a few conversations on the way there in the car or
For
whatever.
our very loyal...
Oh, Patreon subscribers?
Yes, which
Yeah.
you can become.
We always want the podcast to be free.
Well, the
but,
podcast is free.
And that is what it is. But, I mean, who would fucking pay for this, right?
I wouldn't. I mean,
As a product, I mean.
I do with beer.
Only
The
in a
really
bad
good
manner.
content is just behind the paywall, guys.
Yeah.
Well, that's... I mean,
No, it's not even that. It's just, like, different content. Like,
well, the drunk tank that we did last week was really good, and the preview, I think, was really good.
Well, so, like, in this episode,
Even.
we had a little bit more of a straight-edge energy. But
Which
it's
is fine.
also during the
It's
day.
just earlier in the day.
And,
yeah,
you know,
it's definitely just earlier in the day.
you know, I got up early enough to eat a solid meal, and so, like, I hit this beer buzz with, like, some resistance, you know?
No, I was like, I just got to coffee balance level of being able to go about my day, and now we're going to crush some beers and talk about Vonnegut, so
Yeah.
let's get into it.
All right, so would you rather?
Oh, yeah.
So here's
Like,
the
share,
would
and
you rather.
subscribe.
Now,
Would you rather?
Johnny, it's been a few episodes since we've given the 30-second, like, ride instructions for this.
Yeah,
thing.
we should repeat that, I think. That's
Okay,
worth
so I'll
repeating.
start and then Luke.
For
you
anybody
just run over
tuning
it.
into
Yeah.
this first
it's
episode,
fine.
why are you a genie and what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
So, would you rather? I think most
Those are good
people
points to cover.
are familiar with. It's you ask two extremes, and you have to pick one. You can't say, I don't choose when I quit. And a lot of times, people cop out of that choice. Would you rather, eat a shoe or not have shoes or something? He goes, well,
It's
forget
like, oh,
it.
well, I wear
I'll just
sandals
wear
most of the
sandals,
time
yeah.
anyways.
So I'm
the ones you give while you're giving the instructions.
So I'm empowered
Off the cuff.
with certain immortal genie powers to not only force you to answer the question, but to make it work. So if I posit a question and you go, well, can't I just go out that door? I can be like, oh, right, doorknobs don't exist in this reality. So
Right.
it just so you have to focus on the one aspect that I'm trying to get you to focus on. So I do have
Right.
certain powers, not really in real life, but
Yeah,
in
guys,
genie
in the
world.
life where you're driving to work listening to this podcast,
I just
genies
like
aren't
beer.
real.
Yeah. Well, that's
Well,
conspiracy part three.
let's not say that for sure.
I'm just not a genie.
Well, but that's what a genie would say.
I know. Anyways,
well, Johnny, you were a genie ever since you spilled hot glue all over yourself and your eyes.
Oh, we figured that out, Johnny. That story is your transition into being a genie. That's how you transformed. Oh, nobody knows what we're talking
I
about.
think we just broke
Oh,
Johnny
no,
up.
he's like, they found my secret. But I just realized nobody knows. Johnny's switching on the
Joe
webcam.
told a story on the drunk tank. The drunk tank are...
you can't
are
tell
these
them.
little-
What's the
No,
point?
no. We're
rewarding
telling
the
them that you
Patreon?
can-
We're telling them where the story exists.
Yeah, you can access the story if you become a Patreon subscriber and have access to the drunk tank episode.
In drunk tanks, we just keep recording after an episode like this.
Yeah.
And obviously, if we keep drunk courting, we get drunk courted.
I like drunk courting. Yeah.
Drunk courting, yeah.
Drunk courting sounds
So,
like you're wasted, like
Joe told a
quartering and
story
drawing someone.
involving Johnny like accidentally messing with some PVC glue, and we think this is the genie like gel that like spread all over Johnny's body and made
Right.
him into a genie.
Because that always
Hashtag
comes up.
genie
Where,
lube.
yeah, because Luke's always like, Johnny's getting the genie lube, and it's
Yeah.
like that was it. It was that PVC pipe glue that that's like your X-Men or your
That's
Marvel
the worst
origin
lube
story.
ever. Glue.
Yeah. No, it's not the glue you want on you. That's for sure.
So, anyways,
That's the Hulk juice that I fell in or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was your vat of whatever.
now that
Insert
we've
whatever.
updated people, go ahead.
Okay,
Genie.
so as Genie Johnny, would you
We
rather?
gotta post it today instead of a legal pad.
I love that. Last week he had this big legal pad. He looked like a fucking genie lawyer, and he
he
had
was
like
ready.
glasses at the tip of his genie nose. And this week he has a fucking post-it with
Yeah.
some chicken scratch on it.
Yeah.
Well, to be
It's like
fair,
he definitely woke up right before the podcast this week.
To be fair, that's all true. And also, it was chicken scratch on the legal pad too. So it was just
Fair enough.
a different form. I have many sizes of note taking.
I
Anyways.
believe it, yeah. But let's not upset him before we even get into the would you rather.
rather
Yeah.
become a famous author
Yes.
a year after you die, or a year before you die? But what you're going to be most remembered for long after you're dead is the last 2 years of your writing.
Oh, that's a lot of math.
It's not. It's
in
the numbers
both
1 and 2,
cases?
Joe. In both cases, that's what you're...
Oh, so you're saying in the
You're
rather...
going to become famous, but would you rather become a famous writer a year before you die or a year after you die? Knowing that, like, the main work that you're known for is going to be... Like, your Leaves of Grass is going to be the last 2
I see what you're
years.
saying.
No one's
So
gonna know the
if you
shit
choose
do
the
up it.
one where you get famous before you die,
Right.
then you get to enjoy being famous for what you just recently wrote.
Right, but
Whereas
it's going to
after
affect...
you die, you
Yeah.
will die not even knowing that you will become famous.
Right.
But you'll be dying writing the very
No,
things
but
that will make
you'll
you
know
famous.
because you made the deal with the genie.
Will you
Right.
know that's going to happen, Johnny?
You know what? I think to make sure your writing is unaffected, because something you missed there, Luke, is you're aware that you're famous for your last year of creating art.
Right.
So
Or you will
might-
be famous,
so-
yeah.
No, you start getting famous in that last year. It's like George Martin getting
in the
famous
rather,
as an
yeah.
old guy. It's going to affect. It could affect the quality of your writing because you're
Right.
writing from the perspective of I have a legacy now. Let me top
Right.
it off.
Right.
Rather than and also you don't know because otherwise you'll be like shit. I'm going to die in 12 months. So I don't want to freak you out that way. So I think you lose knowledge of this conversation as soon as you make your choice.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
See,
it's
that's why I have to be a genie, people, is so that
No,
I can write
it's-
memories.
There's the
selectively.
genie angle because there's too many loose ends that you just
Yeah.
have to tie off with like
Mm-hmm.
black and white rules.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. That's an interesting question because I do write, and I think, and I say this like not as like somebody who's trying to play the angle of, oh well, I think both options suck. I'm willing to choose an option, but I'm just saying like objectively, I honestly don't care. In the sense that I'd rather just keep writing and doing my own thing, and wherever the cards lie in terms of, in terms of people appreciating
So
my
you
work.
would choose the second one.
I would. Which one is that? Where I'm
Famous after you die.
I would probably choose that because I already write and I'm not famous. So I rather
And
just
you like it.
I don't care. Like I rather just keep writing and doing my best.
Do you think it would disturb you finding your true voice knowing you were famous?
Or would you be able to write more timelessly and poignantly, knowing that your future people are going to read it?
I would like to think it wouldn't make a difference. I mean I can't say that it would or wouldn't.
One difference I could see it making is that if
I think
you're sitting
it
there
might.
as a writer and you know you're famous,
Yeah.
you start writing to like the people you think like in real life would buy it. Whereas when
Right.
you're not famous, you write it to your own ideal, thinking like the right people will come find it.
Right.
I can see the corruption being more easily
Yeah,
happen.
I
when
think
you're
that's
famous.
I think that's a fair point. Certainly, I think I mean at this point, like it's not like I've been writing for 20, 30 years. Wait, I have been writing for 20 years. God damn it.
just not 30.
Yeah, and just not well either because like I started writing when I
You
was
were
like
like
10.
the house is red when you were 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
in script.
but there's something to be said for that, for being so bad at writing for so long. One of the things I say to my students because they'll come to office hours and they'll be like, we'll talk about writing, and sometimes, especially if they're creative writers, I'll tell them about my work and like stories I've written or whatever, and a lot of them are really impressed. They're like, oh my god, like you're such a good writer and blah blah blah. And my reaction, very genuinely, is always, what are you talking about? I'm not that good. And they're like, no, compared to me, blah, blah, blah. And the answer I always give them, and it's really the most genuine answer I can, is that the only reason why I might be any better than you at writing, whatever that means, is because I've been failing at it longer than you have.
Yeah.
And
That's exactly true of music, too.
I really do feel that, and I think the fact that I've felt that and I've gone through it, that like I wasn't like a writing prodigy when I was an undergrad. Like some people, they get out of college and they start publishing books. That happens. It's rare, but it does happen. Yeah. I've had to struggle through it and figure out like, yeah, what's the wrong way to write a book? Like that's not easy to do. Write a bad book and then be able to say like, okay, well, how do I do this well now?
Well, that's the best way to do it.
It might be for
I think
sure.
so.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to do it, but a lot of people give up at that point for more than fair reasons. But
that's the whole point, though, right? That's what makes it unique and special is that not a lot of people have the nerve to push into that kind of.
Well, Kurt Vonnegut,
Vonnegut.
He didn't publish his first novel until he was at least 30, I think. Like, it just didn't happen.
But also, like, on the Kurt Vonnegut angle, he as we were saying, is just not afraid to, like, admit the bad in the world and, like, look at it nakedly. And
but
that's part of the equation.
Yeah, and I think going through, like, the shit that he went through and just going through life shit in general and being able to still write about it and reflect upon it, I think I'm at that point where I do that. And so, to the would you rather, that's why I say, like, not as a cop-out, like, that I really don't care. So I rather do whichever option just makes me produce the best work. So in that sense, it would probably be the one where I'm famous after, because, again, yeah, sure, I would love to be famous now, just in the sense that, like, that would be really cool if more people read my book, and, I would love to talk to people about my work and that sort of thing. So that would be cool, but that is a bit selfish in certain senses. So, ultimately, like, if I had to choose in the case of a would you rather like this, I'd rather it be famous and, ideally, like, help people, like, as per Vonnegut, like, realize things and open their perspectives after the fact.
Change their perspectives.
Yeah.
And see things from new angles.
Yeah.
Although I could see the added responsibility of being famous as, like, something that gives you more meaning.
That's a fair point,
to know
too,
that
balance.
You're actually going to be writing not to an imaginary possible audience, but like, when it gets published, that 1 million books are being sold.
Right.
I don't know if that's a normal number of books to be sold.
Depends on who you're selling to.
It's not just that level of famous.
Sure. Deepak Chopra, probably.
Yeah.
I guess I should point out, you're like a Mark Twain type in this situation, where, like, even while you're alive, they're like, oh yeah, you're going to be famous for a long, long time. So it might impact your writing
I don't want
positively.
That kind of ego game going on. I'd rather be famous.
I don't care.
Like Luke said, you might see yourself as having a more timeless audience, so you create something different or better or more, more timeless. Whereas opposed to just writing for your audience at the here and now.
For me,
not
I think
just
writing
size,
is
but
most special when the writer seems to be just not even projecting themselves into the writing so much as just, like, being a mirror to reflect reality.
Well, and as per that point, that's something else I've realized about writing, is that my favorite authors, really the word that comes to mind when I read their work is genuine.
Yeah, you have to be really good writing is just a little too honest.
And I think you can sense
and that makes you and as a reader, really good writing often makes you uncomfortable, right? Yeah. And that's a good thing, because that's challenging what you think.
Because you feel like as you read a sentence, if you're reading something pleasant, you're like, I'm sitting in bed reading a book.
I could have just watched porn and gotten that same feeling. Like,
isn't that so weird though? How that happens? Like, really good stage craft, like a really good play, will make you feel uncomfortable, but so will really bad, like, improv. But everything in between is kind of mediocre and takes up your time. But just that feeling of discomfort, it has to be either really good or shit. I think the discomfort
is when you realize the humanity of what you're, like, instead of it being like a thing,
Yeah.
So, like, in like a book, when the author says something, like, brutally honest about life or something, it feels like you went from reading a book to somebody just came out of the book and whispered in your ear, "You're going to die," and then you're just like, "Oh," and you go to
shit,
bed.
I forgot about that for a minute because I was trying to enjoy a book. Thanks.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's like, I'm working on a book now, and as per that example, like, I got up to this one chapter.
Like, share, and subscribe.
And as I'm writing it, I'm like, it was difficult for me to write because it was uncomfortable for me to write, because it's such a terrible, like, what happens.
Uncomfortable to see in reality written out.
Yeah. And like, to do that is hard. Like, that's hard to do.
Easier to pretend it's a thought that doesn't come up.
Exactly.
And when you write it down, you make it more real.
And you make the reader know it's coming.
Yeah.
And then you make the reader have to deal with it like the characters.
Porn?
I mean, ideally, Johnny's. I think. Wait, can I ask a question?
Careful with the genie question.
Yeah, I think we're wearing down the genie. I've been waiting for this.
Wait, this is actually a new technique. Yeah. Joe and I just get really philosophical and make the genie go to sleep, and then we don't have to choose.
We found a genie loophole.
We just send him to, like, 1947 or something, and he'll be confused.
I mean, that's how Prometheus did it, right? Didn't he get Zeus to fall asleep or something and gave us all fire?
Is that how it happened?
I don't really remember too clearly. I was kind of drunk at the time, but
as a genie?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, you go through, like, 20-year drunk periods as a genie, right?
No, honestly, I haven't eaten today. You were pretty close to the maybe I just woke up and wrote this on a notepad, post-it note right before, because I've only had one beer, but it's an Imperial
I've had
Stout,
like 3.
And I'm feeling good.
Well,
right
can
now.
I ask you a question? What would you choose as a genie?
We'll see, because I kind of want both. Like, I like the idea of...
Of course, because you're a genie. Of course you want both
And you can
realities
live both.
simultaneously,
Like,
yeah.
I'll honestly admit, I would love just being, like, some cool old dude, and people would be like, you're wonderful. Like, this book
Yeah, but you
wrote
could
is
do that
amazing,
anyways.
and now I'm going back to all your other stuff. Listen, like you were talking about, like, people to just talk about it with, and I'm not even a writer. But, like, look at George Martin. He went from this, like, fat nerd obsessed with turtles and sci-fi and incest. Probably not that popular of a concept in the 90s when he got that into it. But now he's this icon, and people dress up like his characters and, you know, want to talk to him and be near him. And, like, so for him,
no wonder
experience that.
No wonder he's in no rush to finish the novels.
Right.
Also.
Why would you wrap that up? He's got other things. But if he knew, like, you only have a year left, this is, like, how you finish the series is how you're going to be remembered, not how you started it. I would wonder what he would choose.
So can I and I say this, like, as, you know, per the point, genuinely, like, can I just choose the I mean, I guess instinctually I would choose the option where I'm more famous after, so that doesn't dilute things, but I honestly rather choose what makes the better work, that more people will eventually be like, you know, even like Vonnegut now, like, he's dead, but people, you know, hopefully Vonnegut's dead. People read his work and they appreciate it and they get something out of it. So I'd rather choose whatever option elicits that, you know, more reaction. But I see what you're saying, where, like, yeah, that is kind of cool to be able to be somebody who, you know, you can have a conversation with. But I feel like even now, like, stuff I've written, like, people will talk to me about it. So, like, that's enough for me now. Is, like, even, like, people who I just know who read my work. Like, I had a conversation with a coworker the other day about a book of mine, and she was just, like, talking about it. She's like, yeah, I really like this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's cool. That's good enough. Like, I don't need, like, a cult follow. I mean, that would be great, like, if more people were into it eventually, but I don't need that to keep writing. You know,
well, the thing is, once you make your
motivation.
choice, I'm wiping your memory of the choice and what's going to happen.
That's
so
true.
you don't know you're going to die in a year. You're going to be like, wow, I've really blown up in the last 2 months. Like, I wonder what you might be like. I wonder. Let me plan my career out. You know, I'm going to start working on a screenplay over the next
sort of like the
and then you're dead before you
question,
produce
though?
anything else.
It's like, would you rather get in the tank where you design your perfect life, or would you rather just not get in the tank, right? And, like, to get in the tank would be to not know you're in a tank, but to know you are now going to live out the rest of your life in this designed perfect life.
Can I still have beer?
Either case, you have to pick one, and you don't know in either case.
Yeah.
But the tank part is death, so it's a little different.
Wait, but the first one, I'm not famous after I die.
One, I forget which one I asked first, but one, you're famous. You're famous either way. It's just when you become famous.
Yeah.
You either become famous
Whether
before
you become
or
famous
after,
or before you die.
I see what you're saying.
I would say.
I mean, I would be okay becoming famous before I die, because
I would say it would make me die in a more like
but what you're
thoughtful
most
way.
known for is those last 2 years. So you have a year of you doing work, and then all of a sudden, at the end of that year, you start blowing up, and then you're dead at the end of the next year. So
yeah, but that's fine,
what do
because
you
the
think?
backlog people will be into.
I know what I would do. I would purposely write really shitty material. That way I could use
You
this
can't,
to
though,
cheat
because
death.
you don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
He
That's
wipes
what
your
you'll-
mind.
Yeah, no, you don't know. You're just like, wow, I've really gotten famous in the last couple of months. Like, I'm going to have a great next 10 years. Where's he going? We're almost done. What are you doing? We're like finished. That was it. That was the end of it. We're going to wrap it. Where's he going? What the
I got a
fuck?
pee break.
I've been drinking coffee and coffee beer for 2 hours.
All right, Johnny, let's round it off. I mean, I think we know what we're going to pick for the Would You Rather. Let's round it off with Vonnegut in some way. So
We did that while you were peeing.
Oh, you did?
Sure, let's wrap it up again.
I was thinking, actually, on the topic of peeing, I was thinking about podcasts. Like,
Why don't you guys keep a Gatorade bottle in
well,
there?
so
or
I was
something?
wondering about that. So, you know, a lot of the long podcasts, like, people go like 2 to 3 hours without peeing, and it's so mysterious to me, coming from our context. But, like, I realize, like, we're drinking beer as we podcast, so, like, that's such a factor in terms of, like, having to pee.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can, like, game the system so that, like, we can have equal podcast rights even though we're drinking beer?
Don't think that's how you phrase that. I don't think it's a rights issue. But I would just say get a fucking bucket and pee in it. There's a comedian who always does it, Ari Shafir. He always pees on podcasts.
He always pees in bottles. Yeah.
Like on camera on podcasts. And they're like, what are you doing? We're fucking live streaming. Let's go in the bathroom. He goes, no, I don't want to miss anything.
I mean, it's totally acceptable to go to a bathroom, but it's so annoying. And I feel like if
it
there
is
was just,
kind of
like,
nice,
a device
though.
you could just hook up to yourself when you
It is nice, though, because
pee.
it breaks the conversational flow. Now me and you are trying to talk about something, whereas we wouldn't have had to do this before.
I think we're talking about pee, buddy.
And then when Joe comes in, it's going to go, like, now it's in a totally different direction than it would have been if he didn't leave. So it is kind of good.
Right. But
also, I don't want to hear the splatter. I don't want to hear that slowly raising pitch of the bottle filling with piss.
But Johnny, what direction? Oh, yeah, that's a gross sound. But Johnny, what direction would the podcast have gone in if Joe was sitting here with his dick out peeing, and then I'm just trying to talk to you while he's peeing, or he's trying to talk to you while he's peeing? Like, all the scenarios are kind of bad.
What I miss?
We were trying to just kind of like give the listeners an idea of how much of a struggle it is to do a podcast while drinking beer.
We could do like a very brief drunk tank if you wanted.
Want to do like 10 minutes of
do like a 20-minute drunk tank or something.
Material?
Yeah, you know, for Patreon subscribers
Cool.
or loyal.
Just give me 1 second.
He's chugging a beer. Oh, he's getting ready. Yep.
That's breakfast, Johnny.
He chugged a breakfast.
That's Thunk Tank breakfast, because Thunk Rise is noon. That's just.
I immediately regret my decision.
That's been established. All right, I think we should go into a drunk tank.
Ooh, I forgot this is an 8.5% stout. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm there, guys.
Yeah, we have one more beer.
Folks, drunk tank is a spontaneous event where if we're feeling happy at the end of a regular episode,
and
we're
feeling
keep
happy.
recording for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes.
It's not even 3 o'clock. We're still in drunk morning.
Sun's out.
A thunk morning. Oh, fuck, it's working.
Sun's out, guns out. All right, so let's wrap this shit up.
Yeah.
How do we wrap it up? Do we just cut and keep talking? Do we have to actually stop recording? Or
wait, did you actually pick? You guys didn't actually pick your Would You Rather. Just give me a before. Or I guess we explored it.
I would choose after, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to state for the record, I'd rather choose what most people would get the most out of my work from.
Right, well, let me add
you have to choose one.
No. But I'm saying that to preface the fact that I know I have to choose one. But what were you saying, Johnny?
So either you die before, or let's say you're sitting and doing a podcast, and
I knew he was going to do that.
Fuck.
I knew he was going to do that.
So somehow, even though I knew going into this episode, we gotta keep an eye on him hanging.
We'll get him
up
for
on
drunk
us.
tank though.
All right, let's plan it right now because he won't hear this.
We'll
until,
do the Reddit thing where you're like,
okay,
we're just randomly you'll be like, oh my god, Johnny.
How many minutes in? Like, because we're on camera too, so he can see us. So
oh shit. Okay.
Not right now. I mean,
I don't know, 20 minutes.
All right, so
we'll do like a 20-minute drunk
after
tank.
About 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So folks, we're gonna go into the drunk tank for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I got them again. I always get those fuckers. They always. I think it's partly their fault for ending the show on my segment. But yeah, they fucked up again. So I hung up on them. They're definitely cursing and upset right now. But we're gonna do some more serious podcasts like this one. I hope it wasn't too heavy or esoteric. People that either don't know Vonnegut, don't care. Don't worry, we're doing a drunk tank that will be more the silly speed of some of our more recent episodes, 8 and 9, whatnot. So this year we're going to do some guest-driven episodes, some more thematic, serious ones like this week's. Excuse me. And also silly bullshit ones still, too. So, yeah, check it out. Maybe we can even put something at the beginning of the episode to let you know if this is going to be a deep one, a serious one, a thinker, a stinker, a joker, a toker. I forgot how the song goes. But, yeah. So, thanks for coming along. I hope it wasn't too thunky. Hope it wasn't too drunky. And thanks for wasting your time listening to us instead of all the many choices out there. And, yeah. So, thanks again, and peace, bitches. See you soon. Like, share, subscribe, and give us some feedback. If we missed anything about Vonnegut or got anything wrong, specifically this episode, we would like some fact-checking. sure there's people with PhDs in this motherfucker. So, yeah, it's a community. Takes a village. Let's all work together to learn interesting shit and have fun. Peace, bitches.